Hi, good morning. I thought today's video would be a little bit more information on Baal or Baal. And I wasn't really fully prepared to do this video. Actually, I rarely am. So let's begin with a verse that we find in Deuteronomy 13:13. And I was recently looking into that word Belial, the sons of Belial. And so we'll read the verse first to put some things in context, perspective, I guess. Deuteronomy 13:13 says this. It says, "Certain men, the sons of Belial, are gone out from among you and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their cities, saying, Let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known." Now, the word, when you look up Belial, it means worthlessness. These sons of worthlessness. And they're often connected to God worship. And I tend to link it back in my studies, the more I study Baal or Baal, that these men were encouraging people to depart from the true God, from the laws of God, of heaven, and to move towards false God worship, which was to exalt men as gods and to the debasement of women. That's what our discussions have been following here. Now, we find this another very interesting verse, and we're going to go to what it means to be a daughter. All right? And we don't really look at, oh, big deal. But if you're a man, oh, mighty men of valor and all that. But if you're a woman, well, no big deal type thing. We kind of dismiss her role in the whole covenant. And once you get studying it, you begin to realize it's equally important. All right? They're co-share. They're co-equal in this covenant. So Jeremiah 30 verse 6, it says, "Ask and see, can a male give birth? Why then do I see every man with his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor, and every face turned pale?" So it's weird because we're bringing men into a birthing process. And we know that this has to do with the day of the Lord and the return of Israel back to their land. It says this is found in Jeremiah 30 verse 6. And at the head of my chapter it says, Israel will return to the land. And but all through it we'll find men in travail trying to accomplish something that a man cannot accomplish. This is absolutely appointed on the daughters to do this. And it takes you back to Baal worship, to men who wanted to be bowed down as gods. And the reason why we're going to hit on that is because of the passage that we find in Isaiah 46. And it says this. It says, I'm going to read the NASB version. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versions here. But I'm going to do the NASB. And I might move back and forth between them. But it says, Baal or Baal has bowed down. Nebu, which is another god, stoops over. Their images are consigned to the beasts and the cattle. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the weary beasts. Verse 2, they stooped over, they have bowed down together, they could not rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. So what are we talking about here before we go on to the next two verses? Well, they're carrying these idols around, right, with them, which are really, we're talking about a burden. The idea of a burden comes into view here. And it says, these gods are a burden to your beasts who can barely carry them. And then it says in verse 2, they stooped over, they have bowed down together, they could not rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. Well, what's the burden in view in verse 2? It's not the same thing in view in verse 1. Because in verse 1, the burden that's in view is the actual physical weight of these idols that's in view, okay? So we shift focus in verse 2. It becomes the people, the rescue of the people. that comes into focus in verse 2. Watch what it says. It says, they stooped over, they have bowed down together, they could not rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. They have all gone into captivity. Well, that sounds a lot like a people that's been suppressed through war and through many other means. But it says they could not rescue the burden. And the burden here is the idea of the people. These false gods, and then in turn the people that began to bow down to these false gods, it says they have themselves gone into captivity. Right? They could not rescue the burden. All right? So it's kind of, in a sense, got in view these men of Belial who encouraged these people to bow down to these false gods, to bow to them like, oh, they could do all the things that a god could do. But when it came right down to it, these same men who is taking the people and telling them, bow down to these other gods that we have never known before, we just read that verse, in the end have gone into captivity themselves and couldn't rescue the burden. These false gods couldn't, and these sons of Belial, or these men of Baal, you read Baal Berith in Judges 6, I think it is, which means covenant with Baal. And it's these men, lords and masters, that were in covenant with, and it takes you back to another word, El-Berith. But it's a false god, and that's the spirit of Lucifer that they were in covenant with there. Right? So it's all starting to kind of pull together. I'm sorry, I'm not being very good about this. So in verse 2, the burden that we're talking about being rescued is actually the people themselves. And they've all fallen into the same captivity, the worship of false gods. And we've discussed what that really is. It's the exaltation of men to a godlike status with righteous daughters, and we're going to specify that here. It's righteous daughters that's in view. We're not looking at those daughters that have allowed the whore spirit to prevail within them and take them over and do her bidding so that men could be exalted in the earth. That's the covenant, the keeping of the covenant. We're looking at righteous daughters here being subjugated so they no longer know who they are and what their role is. All right? And this goes back to the birthing of the Spirit. Okay? The Spirit of truth by these righteous daughters in the end of days, which is Mother's strong right arm called the daughters of Zion. So verse 3 of Isaiah 46 says this, listen to me, O house of Jacob. I actually think it should just simply be Israel. And all the remnant. Now that remnant, the more I've studied it, the more I've come to realize it's actually speaking about the glory. And that is the daughter Zion, who is the right hand. And she also in scriptures, as crazy as this is going to sound, she's actually called God. That's her title. God. This core group of daughters, 144,000 daughters of Zion, which is also called the remnant of Israel. And it looks like they're going to march back physically to Israel and take it back. I'm getting off track like I always do. But there's just so much intricate here that you actually kind of have to do that to thread the whole picture together for anybody who's able to go in, watch the videos, and pick those threads up. And I hope there's more than just me and my sister, my blessed sister, and my mother. I love my mother dearly. That can pick these pieces up and thread them together. I really pray, that the Lord would bless us mightily. But it looks like when that great shaking takes place, it looks like it's Mother's way of making a way back for the daughters of Zion to physically go back to Israel. And as they go, they gather. This 144,000 daughters of Zion, which is called the strong right arm of God, Mother says to Job in Job 40, have thou an arm like unto God. And then she confesses several verses later, then I will confess a thing unto thee, know thee not, thine own right hand can save thee. Well, she's talking about the daughters of Zion, which is called God, that were cast down to the earth, showing the rejection of the Spirit and the principles of God. which makes us acceptable into the heavens. That's why we're not in the heavens, because we rejected those principles and we said we don't want those. But this strong right arm is called God. Know thee not, thine own right hand can save thee. And in the end of days, they are appointed, they are manifested, the glory is seen in the earth. They're actually empowered in some way that I don't fully understand, to go forth, and they gather as they go. And they literally track back to Israel, is what it looks like, to Mount Zion. That's what it looks like. And this shaking, looks like it's the land masses coming back together as one. Because if you look in Genesis chapter 10, it says, in the days of Peleg, the land was divided. Well, Peleg's name means earthquake. Well, what are we having right now if it isn't great earthquakes and mighty shakings and the volcanoes going off? Well, obviously, if you have a great shaking, you're going to have volcanoes going off. They're just connected. That's the way it works. But it says there'll be a great shaking, and it's about the restoration of these old foundations being appointed back to their rightful place, to their former estates, is what the Bible says. And it's the daughters of Zion, which is Mother's strong right arm, which is God, which is Christ's rod. Mother says in Psalms 110 to her son that sits to her right hand, she says, I will send the strength, or the branch of your strength out of Zion, and she will strike through her enemies in the day of her wrath. That's daughter Zion, which is also the witnesses in the earth. And we can link those witnesses, believe it or not, to Moses, which is the law of heaven. We're not talking about man's law. We're talking about the real law that was given by God, that made us acceptable unto God, that allows us to enter into the new heavens, our new bodies. And without that, we're not going to do that. And then you have Elisha, who has this spirit within him that fights against Baal. That was what he struggled against, Baal worship. And what did God say? And Romans 11 becomes pivotal in our understanding of these daughters that are called the first fruits. And I'm sorry I'm getting off track, but this is important enough to go to. Let's go to Romans 11, and I'm just going to read what it says about Elijah. Because, here we go, because it's important. She says, let me see here. It says, verse 4, it says, but what saith the answer of God unto him, talking about Elijah? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. You see, Elijah was strongly connected to thwarting Baal worship, because he knew the true God. Mother. He knew Mother, and he knew Mother's principles, and he knew that it was her principles that made us acceptable in the heavens. We're not going to be accepted into the new heavens on these old principles. And if you think we're going to be accepted in the new heavens with these old man-made principles that exalts men, he, to a godlike status, then you haven't studied the word to the depth that you really need to. So she says that. But what does it say? It brings in the first fruits in Romans 11. And those first fruits are the daughters of Zion, appointed back to their former estates. And I know it sounds crazy that this great shaking that we've got coming up, and it is coming, it's right on us, that it's going to actually make a way for us to return back to Israel physical. These 144,000 daughters seems to be what is considered the remnant of Israel. They're actually descendants of Israelite women who carried these mantles. And we talked about the mantle in the very first video I ever made, Woman, Who You Are in God. And it looks, the more you look at this, the daughters of Zion go by many titles. They go by daughters of Zion. They go by daughters of Jerusalem. They go by daughters of Judah. And it appears when you get studying, like I did, the Key of David, the Key of Solomon, that they actually had mantles that identified them as these daughters. And they literally wore these robes that identified them as daughters of royalty. And they were called the daughters of Zion. And they came from every tribe in Israel that there was. And just a second here. Got something coming up. And they were identified by these mantles. And then it says, as they passed through the wall, the sons, I'm going to say these sons of Belial, were ripping these mantles off of them, their robes off them. They were removing their birthrights from them. We discussed this, right? And it says, as if they were at war. So these daughters did not know that they were at war with the sons who hated them. All right? And we discussed that. So, I'm sorry I got off track there. But Romans 11 brings into play the first fruits. And it says, if the rejecting of them, I'm sorry, I lost my place that fast. No, there it is. What does it say? We'll just read it right quick here. Verse 15, it says, for if the casting away them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life? Get this, but life from the dead. We are talking about these daughters of Zion, who is the spirit that gives life to the body. This is what we're connecting, these daughters of Zion, this 144,000. It says, Christ says, you can reject, you can blaspheme the Father, you can blaspheme me, but you won't blaspheme the Spirit and get away with it. Well, why? Because they are what brings you life from death. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? Verse 16, for if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy. It's talking about the body. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. The former estate. The beginning and the end. The beginning spirit, the end spirit. I know it's a bit confusing, but that's what this is all taking us back to. When it says, ask and see, can a man give birth? Why then do I see every man with his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor, and every face turned pale? They can't deliver themselves. They can't deliver themselves. They can't deliver the burden. It's not appointed unto the sons to do this. This is appointed unto the daughters of Zion to do this. And they were appointed this role from the very beginning. They were under oath, and it's called grace. And it is a promise, no matter what sins you commit, you are under grace. And at the end, you are to rise up with truth in your mouth, no guile. You will not be found holding the guile, the fallen law of the enemy in your mouth, or you will never be accepted in heaven. She brings life to the dead. And it says out of the first fruits, which is the remnant of Israel, the glory, daughter Zion, risen up. All right? Now, we got away, right, from men giving birth, and we had read, they could not rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. This is found in Isaiah 46. Now, let's read verse 3 and verse 4. To get this clear to who's going to do the delivering. All right? And it's feminine. Hearken unto me, O house of Jacob, or Israel, and all the remnant of the house of Israel. Now I'm in the King James. Which are born by me from the belly, the womb. Which are carried from the womb. This is mother. And even to your old age I am. It says he. I don't think a he has a womb. Let's go back to Romans 1:20. You are without excuse not to understand the Godhead. I manifested it in the things that I created for your eyes to bear witness to. While men do not birth. This is great God Almighty. This is her title. She's the exalted one, and she is the one that is going to deliver us through her strong right arm, the daughters of Zion, which is now Christ's strong right arm, and the way that he will rule. All right? And even to your old age I am she, and even to hoar hairs will I carry you. Means your old age. I have made, and I will bear, even I will carry, and will deliver you. Now she's talking here about her strong right arm, the daughters of Zion, in the end of days, delivering the people, the burden, that the false god cannot deliver. Only these daughters of Zion, holding truth in their mouth, the law of heaven, making us acceptable unto God, are we going to go to the new heavens. That's what we're talking about. And what we have before us now is Baal worship, the worship of men as gods. The Godhead is not he. It never was. It's one male, one female, one body, one spirit. And it is the Spirit according to the Scriptures, the more study you do, that will deliver the people through truth. The Spirit of truth that she must birth. What did we discuss here a while back? Isaiah 26:16. Lord, in trouble have they visited thee. They poured out a prayer when they... Okay, it's not that one that I want verse 17. Like as a woman with child that draweth near the time of her delivery is in pain and crieth out in her pangs, so have we been in thy sight, O Lord. Verse 18. We have been with child. We have been in pain. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. We have not wrought any deliverance. This is daughter Zion speaking. The strong right arm. We have failed to do our job yet, but it's coming. We have failed. We have not wrought any deliverance in the earth, neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen. They're still standing, aren't they? They haven't fallen. Verse 19, thy dead people shall live together. This is the first fruits. Romans 11, verse 15. What did we read? Let's go back. We'll read it again. For if the casting away of them, the right hand that was cast down, for if the casting away of them, which is also called the remnant of Israel, the glory, for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be? But life from the dead. Verse 19, Isaiah 26:19, thy dead people shall live together, with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, for thy dew, we talked about the dew, that's doctrine of heaven, is as the dew of the herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. So it's on us, daughters of Zion, to birth truth in the earth and quit saying he. It's not he. Almighty God is Mother Yahweh. She's the exalted one. And the reason why you don't exalt her is because she turned her back on us, because we rejected her principles of truth, of heaven. And we began to exalt men as gods in the earth. Well, it just told us here, they're not going to deliver you. They cannot deliver you. This is absolutely appointed on the strong right arm of God to do this, which is the daughters of Zion that was cast down in the very beginning, and they arise in the very end. And they manifest some kind of power that I'm still in the dark about. I have speculations on it, but I really like to verify it through the Scriptures. And I really encourage anyone out there who's searching for the deeper truths, if the great shaking takes place and we're still here, then I think we need to dig deeper into the Scriptures and what we've been doing. So God bless you. I'm sorry it's a messed up video, Nick. I hope you can follow me. I tend to get off on other trails, but I think it's important. It's like a thread. You gotta, you kind of have to shift around a little bit to get it to come together. So I love ya. Take care, and God bless you.